Hello there, and welcome to the Scruffy Looking Nerders podcast. I am your host, Tyler, bringing you news on all things nerd and geek related. This week, I'm going to be discussing Baldurs Gate 3 announcement, Diablo news, a Legend of Zelda Tabletop RPG, Robert Downey Jr. truly is the real-life Tony Stark, and much more. So, here we go. First up, I have some housekeeping for you. I know that I said I'd have the VisionCon 2019 video out already, but my video editor is giving me so many problems, so it's not completed yet, but I am working on it. I promise. Secondly, I will be at Game Expo in October in Springfield, Missouri, but more on that as the date gets closer. And lastly, I am also finishing the editing on the first Playable Characters episode, which will premiere next week. I'm extremely excited for this, as I've loved audio dramas for a very long time, and making one is definitely a lot of fun. So I'm enjoying this, and I can't wait for you guys to hear it, because I think it's going to be awesome. I think you're going to love it. So keep your ears out for that. So first things first, on the gaming report this week, first thing to talk about, because I want to talk about it, Baldurs Gate 3 has been officially announced at the Google Stadia pre-E3 event. This sequel is being developed by Divinity Original Sin 2 creators Larian Studios, and here's everything we know so far. So, number one, it'll take place in the city of Baldurs Gate, and it'll feature like not the whole city, but like a lot of it. And the game follows a new story set in the current era of the Forgotten Realms. And the villains in this game are going to be the Mind Flayers. And if you're unfamiliar, they're an ancient and terrifying force in the Dungeons and Dragons universe. They live in the Underdark, which is a subterranean underground society type thing, and they have extremely powerful psionic abilities. They're able to mind control other sentient beings, and they feed on their brains for sustenance, and they also keep slaves to do their bidding and to serve as snacks whenever they need them. And if you remember, in season 2 of Stranger Things, I believe, they talk about a mind flayer being one of the new creatures. So, and that's where they get this from Dungeons and Dragons. So the Larian founder Sven and Vinky told PC Gamer that the mind flayers have rediscovered the secret of nautiloids. Those are big problems, and if you know D&D lore, especially Volo's Guide, you'll know they used to rule the astral plane, but they lost it all and had to flee to the Underdark, or they'd be exterminated by the Githyanki. They want to restore their empire, so we see the Mind Flayers invading a city with a nautiloid, so you can imagine what might happen, but it's not what you'll expect. So, gameplay-wise, it's an RPG, it's like same classic style that we've known and loved, and it'll put you in control of a party of heroes, and they each have their own backgrounds and their own personal quests or goals. Now, that's also a possibility that there will be some sort of origin stories system similar to Divinity Original Sin 2. In Baldur's Gate 3, these may act as an equivalent to a D&D character sheet. Vink suggests that the game will be heavily systems driven, and Larian will be creating its own D&D inspired rule set. He goes on to say, "We'll stay true to our roots, so we'll give players lots of systems and lots of agency to use these systems and try to accomplish what you need to on your personal adventure and your party's adventure. That's not going to change. That's the core of what we're doing, but then there will be an interpretation of D&D, because if you port the core rules, we tried it, to a video game, it doesn't work." So I am beyond fracking excited for this. The Baldur's Gates games were, along with Neverwinter Nights, were a huge staple of my PC gaming upbringing. It was like those games and Diablo. Those were like the games I played. and I've mentioned this numerous times before on the show, I'm sure, but the Forgotten Realms setting is my favorite fantasy setting. I love it more than Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, anything. I Even though I grew up reading like Lord of the Rings and Silmarillion, The Hobbit, all that stuff, and I most recently started reading Game of Thrones now that I'm an adult. But I grew up reading the Forgotten Realms books. Like, that was my thing. And then after I was done reading them, I'd reread them. And I'm trying to catch up on my reading for them now. I'm way behind. But every chapter I read, I love it. And it's kind of like what I've said about Star Wars. Even bad Star Wars is good Star Wars because it's still Star Wars. And that's how I feel about Forgotten Realms. There's been a couple books where they were not as good as others, but even the worst chapters are still good chapters to me because I get more Forgotten Realms. I get more fantasy. So the Baldurs Gate games were always kind of a way for me to essentially play Dungeons and Dragons by myself. It felt like I was playing a D&D campaign, but solo. And so I cannot wait for this game to come out. I'm so excited. And as of now, we don't have a release date window, but we do know that they are working on it. And I think it's interesting too, because a couple episodes ago when I talked about Wizards of the Coast opening up their own studio and working on other projects outside of like Dungeons and Dragons and other avenues of media, I wondered if video games were going to start making their way around from Wizards of the Coast. And I know like they just also announced recently, I believe the Russo brothers are going to be doing a live action Magic the Gathering show for Netflix, which I think is going to be phenomenal. I haven't been disappointed with anything the Russo brothers have done. So next up on the Gaming Report, Blizzard cancels Starcraft first-person shooter to focus on Diablo 4 and Overwatch 2. So this little update comes from Jason Schreier over at Kotaku. And he writes, Blizzard has canceled a StarCraft first-person shooter that had been in development for the past 2 years, according to 3 people familiar with goings-on at the studio. So I'm just going to say, too, I'm really surprised Activision and Blizzard haven't figured out who the hell is telling Jason Schreier all this stuff, because it's like every month this guy's got a new article about something going on inside Blizzard, and he's got these sources that are telling him this stuff. The main reason for canceling the project was to put more resources into the Diablo and Overwatch franchises. The project, which was codenamed Ares, was described to me as quote-unquote like Battlefield in the StarCraft universe by one of those people, all of whom spoke anonymously because they were not authorized to talk about the project. The team had built prototypes in which the player, as a Terran Marine, could gun down Zerg aliens, and there were plans to experiment with playable Zerg as well. Although one person who saw builds of the game last year told me that it seemed like development progress was slow, a second said it came as a, quote, massive shock when Blizzard canceled it a couple weeks ago. A third person said that it was, quote unquote, looking quite good. So that's interesting. He's got 3 different people, and one is saying, the progress was slow. Another was saying that they were shocked that it was canceled. And then a third person is saying that the game was looking pretty good. So, I don't know, that's interesting. And I wonder how long it was in development for. When asked for comment, Blizzard sent over a lengthy and non-specific statement, which you can read in full. Yeah, so if you go and read this article, like they've got the full response, but I guess he just did like a quick snippet. So Blizzard goes on to say, we always make decisions about these things regardless of the ultimate outcome or how things might be interpreted, based on our values, what we believe makes sense for Blizzard, and what we hope our players will enjoy the most, the company said. Nobody was laid off as a result of the cancellation, and according to 2 staff, Blizzard told the team that Ares was getting axed alongside a second unannounced mobile project. So I guess not only were they doing the Diablo Immortal, but I guess they were doing another Blizzard mobile project. I wonder if they were going to try to like port StarCraft or something over, similar to how EA did Command and Conquer. That's interesting. So that the company could move many of them to the upcoming Diablo 4 and Overwatch 2, both of which are expected to be Blizzard's marquee announcements at this year's BlizzCon. Both of these games will be key parts of Blizzard's strategy in the years to come. We reported extensively on Diablo 4, codenamed Fenris, late last year, and what we've heard about Overwatch 2, or whatever it winds up being called, is that it will have a large PvE element. A couple of Blizzard people have compared it to Left 4 Dead. Ares first entered development, so the Starcraft first-person shooter first entered development in 2017, so it's about 2 years old, as an experiment to see what the team could do with Starcraft on the Overwatch engine. An engine is a suite of tools, blah, 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 blah. So heading up Ares was the veteran Blizzard director Dustin Browder, who formerly led Heroes of the Storm in StarCraft 2, and it was planned to be the next game in the StarCraft universe. Of course, this isn't the first time Blizzard has canceled a StarCraft shooter. The infamous StarCraft Ghost, a third-person shooter stealth game that would star the Terran Ghost Nova, went through several developer changes and public delays after its 2002 announcement before it was finally axed in 2006. So, I mean, it's interesting, but it's not really surprising because canceled projects are extremely normal, especially with Blizzard. Because I'm sure they probably have dozens of games, quote unquote, in development. That was the air quotes for that. And, sometimes they get a little further along than what others do. Like this one was 2 years. I mean, that's pretty substantial amount of development time. But with Blizzard, it's also kind of not. And that's why, most studios don't really announce everything they're working on because, I mean, not everything's going to get developed. And, they could be working on a certain project, like this was a StarCraft first-person shooter. And, it could get, 4 years down the road and they're like, actually, what if we just made this into like a looter shooter? And then they turn it, into, and so it's like completely different at that point. So it's smart that they're not releasing or announcing every single project they're working on. And like I said, it's interesting because it goes to show that the Blizzard is really wanting to focus and making sure Diablo 4 is good. So that's like one great takeaway from this is that it seems like they're learning from their mistakes of BlizzCon this year with the Diablo Immortal panel and all that stuff. So yeah, like I said, this is definitely interesting. And especially the Overwatch 2 with like the PvE stuff. That's definitely something else that I thought was really interesting. That's the first I'm hearing of it. I'm sure it's probably been on the internet for a while, but that's the first time I'm hearing of that. And I've said it before, my thing with Overwatch is I wish that they would have more PvE moments in PvE game modes rather than just seasonal event type stuff, because I don't know, those game modes are way more fun for me. So next up on the gaming report, so this a couple of my buddies sent this in chat this morning, and I felt like I needed to talk about it. So Bungie today they just went ham on the future of what's going to happen with Destiny 2. It had came with a video presentation in which the bosses Luke Smith and Mark Noseworthy talked about their Activision free vision, a Destiny 2 that's continually updated and playable from anywhere. So they go on to say that one of their goals was to embrace the quote-unquote MMO aspects of Destiny 2, bolstering the game's social aspects and focusing on RPG stats. Another of their goals is to make the game feel more like a single evolving world, while the third is play it anywhere. So my first takeaway from this is, if they're wanting to focus on making Destiny 2 a continually updated game, I don't feel like Destiny 3 is going to be coming out anytime soon, which is something they probably didn't want to do when they were under Activision's thumb. So kudos to them for stepping away from that, if that's the case. So on September 17th, there will be new Destiny 2 content, an expansion titled Shadowkeep, which is going to be set on the moon and features the return of Eris Morn. This content will be standalone, so you won't need to buy Forsaken or any parts of the game to access it. And they went on to say that that'll be the same thing with future seasons. So I'm glad that they stepped away from that as well, because nothing is more frustrating than needing the previous DLC to be able to buy or to be able to actually play and access the new stuff. The game will get some big changes. It'll have cross-save across PC, Xbox, Google Stadia, and it will also be going to the PS4, which was just announced just a little while ago. So cross-save across platforms, and the PC version will move from Battle.net to Steam. And that's interesting because I was actually just talking to my buddy Devin the other day about what Activision is going to be doing because Division 2 isn't part of their thing anymore, and it was still on Battle.net. So it's interesting that it'll be going to Steam. There will be no more exclusive content. So Sony will not be able to pay to have exclusive rights to maps and weapons and strikes and any content like that for Destiny 2. There will be no more. So everything will be released, I would imagine, either all at the same time across all platforms or staggered in a relatively appropriate time frame. And the base version of Destiny 2, along with all of the year one content, which is Curse of Osiris and Warmind, will be going free to play under the new title Destiny 2 New Light. So I know a lot of people, a couple of my friends as well, were kind of upset that it is going free to play, but I don't know, I feel like this is a smart move. The game's kind of ran its course, and having that base game out there for free now, and then allowing people to purchase the seasons and the DLC and all that stuff, I mean, they're still going to be raking in money. So my only concern is, now that it has gone to free to play, that it will end up having the even more microtransactions or more of that, more items that should not be tied to expansions are going to get tied to expansions. Essentially kind of force you into having to purchase the content, which is what was happening before. I mean, they would come out with the new content and then you weren't able to do certain things that you could before because of the new content. And so it was like they were essentially blocking people off with paywalls. And that was a huge thing shortly after the game came out and the first content was released. I was one of the people who did not buy the first content as soon as it came out, and I was unable to do multiplayer or strikes with my friends, and it was extremely frustrating. So I hope that's not what is going to happen with Destiny 2, because it is really a fun game. Lastly, on the gaming report. So, how many of you are familiar with Discord? How many of you are familiar with Battle.net? So, according to some information that Windows Central has received in recent months, is that Microsoft is working on an update to Xbox Live, more specifically to the social systems, with changes going to profiles with the new options for Xbox Live gamer tags. So check this out. The biggest of the changes is going to be the way gamer tags are seen and worked on Xbox Live. So like right now, you have to choose a unique gamer tag name, and it has to be made up of like numbers, characters, spaces, and you can, pay to change your name, which is then reflected across all of the Xbox stuff on social networks and all that. And the system will remain in place. But to get the users into Xbox Live faster, duplicated gamer tags will receive a number code at the end, similar to how Discord and Battle.net handle theirs. It is they wanted to make sure and clarify that you will not lose your existing gamer tag, and you won't need to use a number code if you come up with a truly unique gamer tag. The number code is simply to help users get through the initial process of signing up for Xbox Live, without forcing people to come up with something completely original and unique by themselves. So I fully expect that we will hear more about this one way or the other, either during or after E3 this year. And if Microsoft does go ahead with the plans, like that's all. If we do hear about it, it'll be because this is something they've greenlit, they're going to do. But I feel like if Microsoft, they've been making these moves with games on like mobile devices, Android, iOS, and they're eventually going to be implementing the Xbox Live on the Nintendo Switch, as well as Project xCloud game streaming. So it makes sense that they would want to update how their usernames and gamer tags work to accommodate a massive amount of potential names across multiple platforms and across different languages. But like I said, I feel like we are going to probably hear something around E3. Not before, it'll be either at E3 or shortly after. So I think this is interesting because, like I said, I mean, with all like Microsoft branching out into all these other different platforms, to me it just makes sense for them to go along with something like this. So this is the only real thing that I'm going to cover on tabletop games. So I don't even know how else to approach the discussion about it. So basically there's a fan-made tabletop RPG system that was designed to put players in the Zelda universe. It's titled The Legend of Zelda Reclaim the Wild. So, and it mainly because, and I would imagine this is because in Zelda games there's not a whole lot of role playing. There's some in it, but it's mainly just adventure hack and slash. But the game is designed to closely emulate Breath of the Wild, but it can be used for any of the Zelda game worlds. I've personally already gone through and looked through like the character sheet and all the book. This game looks fun, and like I haven't had a chance to play Breath of the Wild, but Reclaim the Wild looks like it's just a blast. And one thing that I found kind of interesting though is because typically in tabletop RPGs, the race that you choose for your character typically increases and gives you stat bonuses of some kind or ability bonuses. I mean, it's kind of cool how they did it. Like there's certain races like you only get the bonus if you're doing an action, like a specific type of action. Now, I haven't had a chance to play this yet, so I can't give a definite review or thoughts. But however, you can get these for free over on their website, and their website is reclaimthewild.net. And then you go there and there's a little drop down menu and you just click on download and it takes you to a Mediafire page, and they have the character sheet, the beast guide, the supplemental, the core rules, all that, and then you can just go through with it. And even if you aren't a fan of tabletop RPGs and you're a fan of Zelda, you should check out the book just because of how much work and like effort and detail. Like there's so much Zelda lore in these books. It's incredible. Yeah, like just seriously, go check it out. Like the reclaimthewild.net, and yeah, this game, I don't know, it just seems like a lot of fun. So maybe I can get a group sometime and play this because it looks like a lot of fun. Moving on to movie news. I have two items that I want to discuss. So the first one is potentially spoilers. It has to do with Marvel Cinematic Universe Phase 4. So the sources from this piece haven't been accurately depicted. So take all of this with a grain of salt. Kind of similar to all the Star Wars stuff. Just take it with a grain of salt. Insider Roger Wardell revealed a ton of information about the future of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And over the years, Wardell has fairly accurately, been able to get leaks, and they've been fairly accurate. Apparently, he was the main person who leaked very specific things about Avengers Endgame well before the movie came out, and they were correct. But like I said, I would take this as with a grain of salt, because this isn't set in stone, because nothing's been announced. I mean, some of them have, but not all of them. So this is the list, according to this account, of what to expect in the next phase of the MCU. Number 1, Black Widow. Like I said, it's not a surprise to see Black Widow as the first on the list, because we've known for a while that the movie is being worked on. And number 2 is the Eternals. So there's been several announcements of casting, and casting is well underway, and there's a very high chance that this could be one of 2 movies from the MCU being in theaters in the year 2020. Casting wise, there's been announced Angelina Jolie, Richard Madden, and Kumail Nanjiani set for major roles. And recent rumors is that Marvel is trying to get Keanu Reeves for a role in the film. And whether or not that's true, I don't know. But that's been the scuttlebutt for that. So next, Black Panther 2, and like I said, obviously this was another one of those movies that will most likely be getting a sequel. Number 4, Shang-Chi. This is a movie that they've said that they are definitely, they're writing. Dave Callaham is writing the script, and Destin Daniel Cretton is set to direct the movie. And the studio is still trying to cast the lead. Like, there hasn't really been any casting announcements as of yet. Next, Doctor Strange 2. Once again, another one of those movies where it makes sense. This one I'm super stoked for, and I hope it's true. The next one is Nova. It's been talked about for quite some time, but never really brought anything other than seeing the Nova Corps in Guardians of the Galaxy. But with the shift in the MCU going to a more cosmic hero type stuff, like there's that definite shift going that way, it makes sense to have Nova as the possible forefront of that. Next, Guardians 3, which this is something, there was the whole James Gunn being fired, and then almost a year later, he was reinstated as the director, and he's already announced that he's, the script is done. It'll start filming, I think, in 2020, and the film will probably hit theaters around 2021 or 2022. So this is where the leaks kind of get a little more less likely. They're all still possible. So they mentioned Thor, Ant-Man, and Captain Marvel as characters to get direct sequels in the future as well. I know Thor is potentially a character that might not be at the forefront and moving on in the future. I know at the end of Endgame, he had, made the reference to the Asgardians of the Galaxy. So there's that possibility as well, that he may be chumming it up in space with Star-Lord. Next is new Avengers teams. The source notes that 3 different teams have been talked about behind the scenes at Marvel, and films based on the new Avengers, Young Avengers, and or Dark Avengers could all be on the way in the future, which Dark Avengers I think would be fantastic as a way to implement the Wolverine and kind of like cross over into those kinds of the Fox Marvel properties and bringing those over to the MCU. I think the Dark Avengers would be a great way to get that over into the MCU. All right, lastly, I said I would talk about it, and I'm going to talk about it. One of my favorite people, Robert Downey Jr., announced a footprint coalition to clean up the world with advanced tech. Like I said in the opener, this guy is literally the real-life Tony Stark, because he said in his opening keynote speech for Amazon's Mars conference in Las Vegas just this last Tuesday, he announced the launch of a new organization that is committed to using advanced technologies for the good of the environment. The group is called the Footprint Coalition and is scheduled to officially launch by April of 2020. Between robotics and nanotechnology, we could clean up the planet significantly, if not totally, in 10 years, Downey Jr. said, relaying that he had been given these insights a few weeks back by a roundtable of experts. God, I love experts. They're like Wikipedia with character defects, he joked during his talk. This announcement came at the end of a 20-odd minute free talk about artificial intelligence, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and Robert Downey Jr.'s own career and the evolution of Tony Stark as a character, which featured cameos from Amazon's AI assistant Alexa, as well as Matt Damon, who joined via video. Now, he didn't share any details on how the organization was going to achieve their goals, but said that making a small dent could be the most important thing he had ever done. Throughout his talk, though, he painted AI as a significant technological advancement that gave him hope, only to admit that he also found himself alarmed over the state of the environment. This isn't the first time he's taken AI and other advanced technologies beyond the role of his Marvel counterpart. Together with his wife Susan, he has also been producing a docu-series about AI for YouTube, and it was announced about a year ago, and it's like 8 episodes, each an hour long, and it's meant to explore AI and the impact it will have on people's lives. So my takeaway from this is extremely admirable, because I know so many people, like to act like these actors are just sitting up in their ivory tower and they're not getting involved with the real world and they don't care. But then you see stuff like this, and it's extremely admirable for him even just attempting to do something. And, because so many people just sit back and do nothing. I mean, I'm guilty of that too. But just seeing how much he's grown, even back during like the first Iron Man movie, like he still kind of had that reckless kind of personality to him, and seeing him, step up and do something like this is just mind blowing. Like back in like 1994 or 95, no one would have believed that this would be Robert Downey Jr. in the future, So I definitely think that's great. And like I said, he's one of my favorite humans, and this is a good example as to why. So this concludes this episode of the Scruffy Looking Nerd Herders podcast. Thank you guys so much for your support. Please, if you like what you heard, go to iTunes and rate it 5 stars. Give a great review. Leave a review. Whatever. Just because it helps the show advance into the rankings in this category that I'm in. But be sure to like, follow, subscribe, review, all that good stuff. Share it with your friends. I'm on iTunes. I'm on Spotify, Stitcher, Podbean, YouTube. So, if they're like, hey, bro, I don't have an iPhone. And you'd be like, well, you can download Stitcher. You can download Spotify. You have YouTube on your phone. There's just so many ways to listen, so there's no excuse. So, be sure to also follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at SLNH Podcast, and be sure to pick up some merch. I have recently put another design in my shop. It's a Dungeons & Dragons inspired, original Dungeons & Dragons inspired design. So keep an eye out for that. I'll put a link in the doobly-doo for this show. And thank you so much for the ones who have left reviews, those who have commented, the ones who have messaged me on Instagram, Twitter. It really helps me grow the podcast and get better, and I get to know you guys as well, which is fantastic. So everyone, this is Tyler from the Scruffy Looking Nerd Herders podcast signing off, and Nerd Herders, assemble.